All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome, whether you're joining us live right now or you're catching the replay. We're really glad to have you with us today. Thank you so much for making the time to join this session. We know how busy things get, especially now in the summer. So our goal is really to make the next 45 minutes together well worth it for you. Today, we're diving into one of the most significant updates to LEED in years, and that's specifically how the finalized LEED v5, how it changes the conversation around indoor air quality, performance-based standards, and ongoing monitoring. If you work in the healthy building space, you've probably noticed IAQ becoming more central to the project's goals, certifications, and even occupant expectations. But with LEED v5 evolving over the past couple of years and the final version now released, a lot of teams find themselves asking similar questions, things like, what exactly has changed from the initial draft? How do the new IAQ requirements impact things like design, construction, operations? And where does continuous monitoring sort of fit into this puzzle? So that's exactly what we're unpacking today. If we haven't met before, my name's Joe. I'm from the Kytera team, and we've been especially excited to bring you today's session because we're joined by an industry expert who's actually been at the forefront of these updates. So today's speaker is Sarah Gudeman. She's the practice lead at BranchPattern, professional engineer, and the former chair of the LEED EQ Technical Advisory Group. If you've been in the sustainability space for a while, you probably know Sarah, or maybe you've seen some of her work, and she brings nearly 2 decades of expertise in indoor environmental quality, energy efficiency, and certification consulting. And as someone directly involved in LEED's IAQ framework, in shaping that framework, there's really no better person to guide us through these changes. So before we dive in, want to hear from you. I'm going to launch a quick poll to kick things off here. And you should see that pop up on your screen now. And it's really easy. Are you currently working on a LEED v5 project? So yes, you've already hit the ground running. Maybe you're planning to in the near future. Maybe you're still getting familiar with the updates, or you're mostly here for IAQ insights, which is also completely okay. Let's hear where you're at. Let us know in the poll. I'm going to leave this up and running for just a few more seconds to give everyone a chance to get their answer in. But this will really help us kind of tailor the session to where most folks are today. So let's see those results. It looks like a mix of across the board here. A lot of people planning for future projects and still learning the updates. So that's great to know. And you're going to find today's session extremely helpful. Either way, today's session, Sarah's walking us through what's changed and confirmed. Oh, sorry. I just realized I didn't share the results. There you can see them on screen, kind of split up across the board. Let me get that off. So today, Sarah's going to walk us through what's changed and confirmed in the finalized LEED v5, along with how those IAQ requirements and strategies are evolving. She's going to dive into the specifics of the IAQ Performance Credit, including monitoring expectations, key metrics, and updated thresholds. And of course, she's going to share some practical tools and methods that help teams stay on track and meet those new requirements. So the session is designed to be useful whether you're an architect, engineer, building owner, consultant, or lead AP navigating those updates. And even if you're just curious about how IAQ fits into the bigger certification picture, you're going to walk away with a ton of insights today. So, of course, we're saving time for Q&A at the end. So if something sparks your curiosity, please don't be shy. Drop those questions in at any time, and we'll circle back to those before we wrap up. And also just something that we're going to share with you that's really useful, an IAQ certification cheat sheet, which we'll share just before Q&A. It summarizes kind of the key IAQ requirements across LEED, Well, and Fitwel, so be sure to stick around for that. And if you do have to drop early, don't worry. We'll be sending the full recording afterwards and resources in the follow-up email so you don't miss a thing. Just a quick introduction to Kytera for those who aren't familiar with us. So we do build air quality monitoring solutions that help project teams worldwide improve building performance, create healthier spaces, and meet certification standards like LEED, but also Well, Fitwel, among others. We've been deep in these conversations for years, working alongside project teams on hundreds of Well and LEED projects globally. So we know firsthand how important it is to stay current with these evolving standards. And with that said, joining us today is Sarah Gudeman, someone who's been deeply involved in shaping these standards. As mentioned, she's the former chair of the LEED Environmental Quality Technical Advisory Group, and she spent nearly 2 decades working at the intersection of building science, sustainability, and wellness. Sarah brings not only the technical expertise, but also the real world insight from working with owners, developers, and project teams navigating certification and environmental quality. We've got a lot of ground to cover, so we'll get started in just a sec after this very quick housekeeping. So the webinar is live, it's being recorded. You'll get that recording as soon as the session is over and it's ready. Today's webinar is approximately 45 minutes long. The presentation will run for around 30 minutes, and then that'll be followed by around 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. And then you can send those Q&A questions in at any time via the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. So during today's webinar, we're going to be discussing several key topics, which you can see listed out here on the screen. And with that said, I'd like to pass it over to Sarah to officially kick things off. So thanks everyone again for joining, and Sarah, over to you.
All right. Hey, well, thanks for having me. I think, our partnership with Kytera has been really interesting to see evolve over the years, and I'm excited to be back here after we did kind of a what's coming up in LEED V5 and air quality webinar, maybe a year ago or something like that. So LEED V5 is here. Those of us that have worked on it for the past few years are very, very excited. Hundreds of people contributed to this rating system, and it's really more than an incremental update. You'll notice in the progression of numbers and the rating system versions, we went from version 4 to 4.1, which was also a very exciting upgrade. But now we're at version 5, and this is a comprehensive overhaul. I assume most people have heard something about it already, and based on the poll results, which I was sad I couldn't vote in, there are, a huge representation on where people are approaching V5. So it's great. I'm excited to participate in Q&A and have some dialogue after. I could talk about any of the things that I'm going to say in this webinar, probably for the length of time that we have for the entirety of this webinar. So I'm going to try to go through a lot of content pretty quickly, but I am also really always excited to connect people with other people and follow up and have additional discussions after the fact today, if folks are interested in that. And I'm going to cue Joe to go through these slides as we go through the presentation. So starting off, we can go to the next slide. So why change? Also, if you've been in the sustainability LEED world for a while, you'll remember the rollout of version 4 took a really long time. We're trying to get on a more routine cycle similar to code update cycles. So it's going to be a 5-year cycle going forward here. And you'll notice it might feel faster as we're bringing LEED V5 out to the market. As great as 4.1 was, there were some limitations. It was an incremental update, and we really looked for overhaul of the rating system to address these key impact areas of decarbonization, quality of life, and ecological conservation and restoration. So with V5, we're really shifting the emphasis towards even more measurable outcomes and real-time data, looking at equity and robust occupant health, which is, kind of embedded in the topic of this webinar today. So really, we're looking at whole building operational sustainability in practice and not just in theory. Go to the next slide. In terms of timeline, we're kind of here approaching Q3 and Q4. There's going to be a bunch of stuff at Greenbuild this year if you're attending on version 5 specifically, but the biggest importantest date to note here is Q1 of next year is when registrations for version 4 and 4.1 are closing, and everybody's going to have to start using version 5. So it's not this like 2-year sunset, keep registering and nobody has to worry about the materials credits of version 4 kind of thing that we saw before. Everybody should want to get up to speed on version 5 and what that means, both to pursue certification for project teams, if you're an ownership entity and have to report to things like GRESB, if there's additional content in here beyond even air quality that you're going to want to know. So I'm pretty sure, I think right now, all the reference guides are available for free, but don't quote me on that. Also a plug to get the online version of the reference guide, and I have all that pulled up so we can talk rating system language and specificity later if we want. But takeaway here, LEED V5 is fully adopted, implementation is underway. Our office here in Omaha participated in the O&M Beta V5 program, so I think we were the first O&M Platinum certification in the US. I was very excited about that. So, we're trying to be on the leading edge of that and also participate in close partnership with USGBC on educational efforts. So that said, we'll go to the next slide. And in terms of development, I mentioned, hundreds of people participated to bring this rating system to market. It was a combination of LEED steering committee, technical advisory groups, working groups, consensus committees, all focusing on deep diving on these individual topics. And I'm really proud of the work that my coworkers have put into this new rating system. Besides myself, we've been really heavily invested in making sure that the rating system is not just technically compliant with whatever is leading the edge of the market, but also able to be adopted to different project types. And there were a lot of interesting conversations that went into the language that ultimately is in the rating system. So if you haven't seen the webinars, the other webinars that are related to Ask the Experts and LEED v5, I'd highly recommend getting on those two. They're rolling out over the course of the summer and into the fall, and even I think after, no, they end right before green build. So next slide. As I mentioned, the cycle of the LEED rating system now will be once every 5 years. So we're introducing, introduce LEED v5 first at green build 2023. If you were there, you might, and you're not maybe as in the know on the timelines and the cycles, you might be like, what happened to that? We talked about it in 2023, but it's like, we're here, it's balloted, it's launched. That's another topic I could talk about ad nauseum, but just like the transparency and the public commentary that went into this was really outstanding. So very exciting. LEED v6 will be launched in 2030. Okay, next slide here. And this was really a high-level reorganization, as I mentioned. We're looking at outcome-based performance and setting projects up for success, and really trying to bridge that gap from design intent and rating systems like building design and construction, interior design and construction, core and shell, to operations and maintenance. And I'm going to try to talk about BD&C, IDNC, and O&M kind of all at the same time in this presentation. But that also creates some problems because there's nuances to all those different rating systems. I mentioned O&M and the beta program before. I think there's already been a ton of interest in that because it's going to be more valuable, using air quotes here, but more valuable of a certification, I think, going forward than a BD&C, IDNC, because it's showing proven performance in a lot of different areas. And specifically on O&M, indoor air quality and like the broader IEQ spectrum are now central to this performance first approach and really support the broader goals of decarbonization, resilience, occupant wellness, and moving beyond just compliance. So with that, we'll go to the next slide and we'll dive a little bit deeper into the IEQ category, specifically focusing on indoor air quality. So this section really explores how IAQ criteria have evolved and emphasizes continuous verification and occupant-centric outcomes. So the category revisions in version 5 better align with actual human experience in buildings. That was the intent. And if you're interested in IEQ and this category specifically, again, I'm real proud of what went into the rating system language. So I would advocate to read the whole section if you are so inclined, because there's a lot of interesting content in there that also refers back to other credits in the rating system. And the IEQ criteria here have really shifted, like I said, towards continuous verification and data-driven management, looking at real-time occupant health and wellness over design intent. Next slide, please. So the IAQ performance credits in BD&C really ensure that buildings deliver verified, healthy indoor air quality. That's what we were trying to get to. So like, how do we set projects up for success, operational success in terms of air quality? There are multiple paths enabling customization based on the goals and the resources available for that specific project. And there's different points allocations available for more rigorous performance levels. And the funny thing, being embedded in these discussions and developing the rating system language, one of my best experiences was we were writing the language. We had multiple options. And if you read a LEED credit, you'll notice if there's multiple options, there might also be paths, right? And paths are like subsets below options. So it's like we might have option 1, 2, and 3. And then below option 1, we have path 1, 2, or 3. And then below path 2 and option 1, we have a table that has points. So let's say option 1 is worth 10 total points, and we'll get into this more specifically later, I promise. But there's 10 total points for option 1. Underneath path 2, there's that table, and you get these points depending on meeting these thresholds. And it's a classic example of like, you're in it, you get it, it makes total sense, you write it all, and then you give it to somebody else to review. And this is the beauty of the rating system development process. The steering committee or public comment is like, I don't get it. Like, it doesn't make any sense anymore. And so then we have to go back and try to make it more simple, but there are still those embedded options. So like for enhanced air quality under B, D, and C, it's pretty simple. You get 1 point and there's multiple options for either increased ventilation or enhanced IAQ. And then under air quality testing and monitoring, that's another credit. You can have 2 points, and then there are some options underneath that. You have option 1 for pre-occupancy air testing, and then 1 to 2 points available there for VOC screening tests if you want to do that. And then there's an option 2 where you get another point for continuous indoor air quality monitoring. So BD&C really has fundamental air quality prerequisite, and hooray, the numbering is back. So that's EQ prerequisite 2, enhanced air quality credit, EQ credit 3 for 1 point, and air quality testing and monitoring, EQ credit 5 for up to 2 points. That's kind of like BD&C, IDNC, and I'll refer to BD&C specifically because IDNC is very similar with a couple just minor tweaks. And then under O&M, this is like the heavy hitter when we're thinking about air quality, because again, the market's more established there and we have more resources for projects to be able to embed air quality solutions in them. There's verification of ventilation and filtration prerequisite. And then there's indoor air quality performance, EQ credit 1 for up to 10 points under the O&M system. Okay, that's just a brief overview. So we'll get even more technical here coming up. Next slide. So all of this really builds to metrics and thresholds. And this slide is like trying to represent like, well, what are the minimum and the enhanced limits for all these different contaminants? And it goes beyond this. It goes beyond PM 2.5 and CO2 and TVOCs to a whole bunch of indoor air quality contaminants. But I just wanted to call attention to the fact that there's both this kind of like minimum requirement and enhanced threshold that we have to consider when we're thinking about continuous monitoring and proven performance in buildings. So there's also a distinction between continuous monitoring and spot testing. So both of those things are in the rating system language. And I specifically think there are value to both of those things because we're really answering different questions when we're thinking about continuous monitoring versus point in time testing. And then the kind of information we can get out of those two testing methodologies can help paint the full picture of how the building is performing. So in terms of, again, back to metrics, there is a white paper. I have a link to it on my website, I believe, that we helped put together as part of a working group for the Green Commons, Green Commons, formerly Building Green peer networks, that has a really comprehensive table on what should these limits be, because this is a question I frequently get of like, well, what is the limit and at what point is it unhealthy? And it's not like OSHA where there's going to be a measurable threat to your life if the CO2 level gets above 1,000 in a building. I mean, those numbers are exceptionally higher. And OSHA standards don't even have all of the contaminants that other standards might look at. So there's a table in that white paper, and the title is something like, so you have all this IAQ data, now what? And I think it has the title something better, but the point there is that we had a lot of discussions about what should these thresholds be? What do all of our, industry expertise, both on the tag and off the tag, bring to the table? What are people seeing in terms of actual project performance? And how do we establish these numbers that are really hopefully aligned, not just in LEED and the different versions of LEED, but across different third-party certifications and rating systems? All right, next slide. So here's kind of a summary. This is a busy slide here, but here's kind of a summary on what I talked through on the options for continuous monitoring specifically under these two LEED rating systems. So EQ credit 5, air quality testing and monitoring, has this option 2, for continuous monitoring on one point, you have to have air quality monitors that have these three parameters, as well as temperature and relative humidity. And that's similar for BD&C and IDNC. And then on the O&M side, this option 1 for continuous air monitoring has 1 to 10 points. You have to continuously measure one or more parameter for a minimum of 3 months. This is all on the slide, but I'll read it out because it's worth it. Minimum of 3 consecutive months at an interval of no longer than 1 hour or 15 minutes for carbon dioxide, with data collected at any point during the 12-month reporting period. So if you've done an O&M certification before, you're familiar with, you have to define a performance period for a lot of the data, and there's some different requirements on which data can overlap the performance period of how much. But that 3-month reporting window is important for O&M, and that those 10 points. So to get 10 points under this option 1 of EQ credit 1, you can monitor and get the points based on this table 1. So I'll talk through the options here, I guess. Let me just talk through the options. Points are awarded based on achieving these performance thresholds. So actually hitting these benchmarks for different contaminants. And option 2 then includes a targeted one-time testing for parameters like carbon monoxide, PM10, PM2.5, or TVOC. And then option 3 includes 2 points for targeted one-time TVOC component testing. I think there's something like a dozen individual VOCs that you can test and limit and demonstrate the project does not exceed the limits as defined. So if you add up like options 1, 2, and 3 below this EQ credit 1 for O&M, it's more than 10 points. So it's intended to be a menu that you can kind of pick and choose and see what do you think you can meet, because you already have this data, and if you need to make improvements and then retest or do things like that. So it's not strictly additive like option 1, option 2, option 3, do them all. It's really intended to be a menu of potential options to meet your indoor air quality goals for an existing building. All right, next slide here. So I mentioned, and I love this graphic. I like to play with weird AI graphics sometimes, but there are updated prerequisites too, as I mentioned, in these rating systems, specifically focused on filtration and ventilation. And one of the biggest things here is this MERV 13 filtration requirement. So LEED V5 is really elevating our baseline expectations, and we had lots and lots and lots and lots of conversations about it, requiring MERV 13 ventilation for HVAC systems as part of our prerequisite was like a pretty big change. So this is really, I think it's possible. It's challenging, but it's intentionally challenging, but it's not insurmountable. So the other minimum change that happened just in terms of the language, but it's always been part of the prerequisite, was specifically calling out sections 5 and 6 of ASHRAE standard 62.1 2022 version, and allowing either the ventilation rate procedure, the indoor air quality procedure, or the natural ventilation procedure, or a combination of all those things to meet the ventilation system design. And this is for BD&C specifically. And the MERV 13 requirement in central HVAC systems is to put the filters in those systems that provide either outdoor air or recirculated air. So there's a lot of kind of qualifications embedded in this sentence, but it's outdoor air and or recirculated air to regularly occupied spaces. But there are some alternative options for in-room air cleaning systems or systems tested for effectiveness and safety per ASHRAE standard 241, as well as there's also a requirement for outdoor air monitoring and measurement, which you may be familiar with from previous versions of LEED. And that is only for systems that have outdoor air intake greater than 1,000 CFM. So there are, again, some nuances for buildings like healthcare facilities or residential provisions in the rating system. And this prerequisite is also where the requirement for entryway systems now lives, if you're wondering where that went. On the O&M side, the prerequisite is called verification of ventilation and filtration. And it's really intended to help understand the amount of outdoor air being delivered to the building, as well as the performance of the ventilation, exhaust, and filtration systems in comparison to the current standards for air quality. So if we're thinking about an existing building, if you've worked in existing buildings, you know this, there is no limit to what you might see in terms of air quality or ventilation because buildings change over time and they drift out of tune. And there are also requirements in the O&M prerequisite to investigate regional outdoor air quality, and that's similar to, I mentioned specifically sections 5 and 6 of 62.1. That's always been in the new construction version of the rating system and in the ASHRAE standards. So if you haven't had a chance to read those specifically, I would highly recommend it. And then back on O&M, it wants you to analyze the performance of those systems compared to the current facilities requirements and operations and maintenance plan. And that is a requirement of another prerequisite in O&M. And then calculating, like, so you're looking at how your systems are performing now, you're calculating in an ideal world how much ventilation to different spaces in the building and different systems would you need per the current ASHRAE standard 62.1, and then measuring the outdoor air. So are we close or not? And why or why not? And we had conversations about, like, do we want to make projects get up to speed, or like what can we put in a prerequisite versus a credit? But this is really intended to check your systems, check an ideal, compare the two, like see how we're doing, analyze the filtration, and look at options for upgrading it to MERV 13 in an existing building. It's not a requirement to update all the filtration in an existing building to MERV 13 as part of this prerequisite, but it is highly encouraged because we know there's a direct correlation between filtration and good indoor air quality. There's also a requirement that we look at our existing outdoor air economizers and make sure that those are working as intended. And in systems that have natural ventilation openings, we have to look at those, make sure they're not blocked, and modify any kind of exhaust systems to meet the CFR and the O&M plans. Okay, that's a lot there, but there's good content in the prerequisites too. Next slide, please. When we're thinking about verification, monitoring, and this outcome-based tracking, these are really the priorities. So LEED v5, again, I just want to stress that we're strongly promoting continuous verification, and the market is set up really well, and we're well positioned to do that when it comes to indoor air quality data. And I think there's some interesting conversations happening now on how do we leverage that real-time sensor data to ensure that we're operating buildings to consider outdoor air events or concerns, or even if it's, a periodic outdoor air event or a periodic indoor air event. I think our buildings are able to get smarter and react more in real time, and we're going to see more and more of this coming up on how can our buildings take the endless data that we're generating with all this continuous monitoring and turn it into actionable insights and real-time operational changes. So more to come on that, but there's some really good conversations happening now in the marketplace as well. Next slide, please. I wanted to also call attention to this project priorities credit. This is kind of where all the innovative strategies went in the new rating system. So project priorities credit is 9 points for BD and C, and it is 10 points for O&M. And LEED v5 really, again, is intended to give this menu of options for IAQ to contribute to project priorities and innovative pathways, but there's alignment here with other third-party green building rating systems, like WELL, like Fitwel, like Reset Air, and the innovative strategies or the options below this project priorities credit include innovative strategies, which I'll get back to, LEED AP, so you have to have a LEED AP that's a primary project team member participant of the relevant rating system. So if it's an O&M project, you need an O&M LEED AP. If it's an ID&C project, you need a LEED AP ID&C. But there's also options here for regional priority and project type priority credits, and those are established and defined by USGBC as part of a separate credit library. You can choose exemplary performance. So if you're performing at or above these thresholds, you can get exemplary performance points for different credits in the rating system, and pilot credits. So you can choose to pursue a combination of pilot credits, innovative strategies, exemplary performance, regional priority credits, and project type priority credits. So this is still a question that I get sometimes on terms of innovative strategies. The question is something like, we're going to put in this new product. Can we get a point for that? And even this week, I had a conversation with a project team to explain that the intent and the goal specifically of V5, but of also V4 LEED, isn't this kind of like bolt on, put this product in and get a point, because all of this stuff, for the most part, is embedded in the rating system language. That may have been true, version 2009, LEED version 3, but the days of, hey, can we put in some CO2 monitors and get a point is kind of, we've passed a little bit. That, or bike racks, there's a lot of examples there. So for innovative strategies specifically, you have to document the intent of the proposed strategy, the requirements for compliance, the submittals that you're going to use to demonstrate compliance, and the design approach or strategy. So the language from the rating system is achieve significant measurable environmental performance using a strategy not addressed in LEED V5 green building rating system. So it's like, did we miss something, or has there been some kind of like substantive change in the market that is not captured in the rating system, right? Because we're on this 5-year development cycle, but you have to prove it again, and you can document it as part of project priorities. Okay, next slide, please. So what do we do? What do we do as project teams? We're going to talk about maybe some strategies for effectively integrating and managing indoor air quality in projects, looking and thinking specifically about early stage planning and how do we get to this data-driven practice of integrating specifically IAQ into our projects. Next slide, please. I have a lot of air quality monitors, and I'm interested in getting hands-on experience with them so that we can better advise projects, because there's not really a one size fits all, do this all the time. Here, I'm going to move my blinds here because I'm getting some sunlight. Don't mind me. Okay, there's not one size fits all for this. And even the conversation on point in time testing versus continuous monitoring, every project's going to be a little bit different. So it's important to, look at the project goals, understand if we're going to get value out of these things. I'm also not an advocate for doing things for the points, right? If we want to get a certification, that's great, but let's do things that also make sense for the project and bring value to the investment, if it's a new building or an existing building. So we want to look at both the compliance advantages and the right approach. And sometimes the right approach is also product dependent. So getting experience with a lot of different products can be really helpful to guide those conversations and ask the right questions to understand how can we add value to the project through either and or testing and continuous monitoring. I think there's advantages to continuous monitoring even in new construction projects, because it's setting you up for long-term compliance, operational efficiencies, and occupant health assurance. I also find myself in conversations where people say things like, well, we don't want to measure because what if it's bad and we don't want to know? And I'm also very intrigued in the potential legal implications of not knowing or choosing to not know. And there's maybe like ethical, moral considerations there to think through too. But I do visualize, I mentioned kind of like this integration of data and operational characteristics of buildings, this future where we get to something like outdoor air economizer, and not to say just like temperature based or temperature and enthalpy based, but looking at air quality. So what's our outdoor air quality? What's our indoor air quality? How do those two things compare? Is it advantageous now to bring in more outdoor air? And then you can even get into interesting things like demand response and looking at energy and operational carbon. And there's a really interesting nexus of all those topics. So continuous monitoring, I'm a big fan of. All kinds of different monitors are great for different reasons. And yeah, get hands-on, test things out, find out how they work and what will work for you and your project and your client. And there's some great examples out there. And I know Kytera has a lot of good content to help guide that. So I'm excited to see the cheat sheet later. Okay, next slide. So when we're integrating, you've probably heard before, but early planning and integration and having those conversations earlier is better. So talking through what are the goals of this project? How do we add value? What is or isn't important? And how do we specifically achieve IAQ performance targets if we're pursuing a LEED V5 certification? So schematic design, that's a great time. Getting the team involved beyond who you would think. I think historically, you know, with a background in HVAC design and mechanical engineering, people would go to the mechanical engineer, and that people in this case could be different entities, but you would go to the engineer and be like, what's up with air quality? And that's not something that all mechanical engineers that design HVAC get really geeked out about. So you might have to find somebody else, maybe somebody else on your project team, or maybe somebody outside the project team that specifically can talk air quality and guide you through those conversations. There's also requirements for kind of this cross-disciplinary collaboration. So when we're thinking about air quality in buildings, it's not just the mechanical system's responsibility. We want to look at materials. We want to think about even operations and what's going to be happening in the building. We've had projects where air quality was really important. Maybe it was an educational institution, but they're also doing something like 3D printing. And no knock on 3D printing, because I have one in my house too, but I have it, you're literally, you know, melting plastic. So I have it over by an exhaust fan, a dedicated exhaust fan for my 3D printer, which is also near one of the many dedicated indoor air quality cleaners that I have in my house. So there are considerations that you can make during design for this setting projects up for operational success, specifically on air quality, but it involves working with commissioning providers. It involves talking with your O&M staff, understanding from occupants what's going to be happening in buildings, and working with the whole design team, not just the mechanical engineer, but bringing in architects and owners and everybody else for air quality outcomes. Best practices. There's a great series of white papers USGBC put out specifically on air quality for schools. And these are, you know, a couple of years old now, but I think they're still pretty relevant. And we talked through the project priorities of ventilation rates, filtration media, continuous monitoring, other systems, and like, what does it actually truly mean to have good air quality under those topic areas? All right, next slide, please. So credit path navigation. Projects pursuing air quality credits under V5 have to have this discussion. Do we want to do spot testing? Do we want to do continuous monitoring? Do we want to do both? What are the advantages and disadvantages? I've kind of touched on some of this already, but I think there's value in both of these things. Spot testing gives us maybe more, I don't know, cost effective. That's again, that was another webinar Kytera recently did on well performance testing. So listen back on that one. That was an interesting conversation. But there's cost implications to both of these things. You get that point in times kind of like snapshot verification of what's going on. You can do component VOC testing, which is something that we're not able to do yet with continuous monitoring. But then again, on the side of continuous monitoring, there's value in long-term data, trends over time, establishing a baseline, looking at how the building performance changes, if it maybe is drifting over time, and bringing it back into normal operational standards, or even off-gassing of new building products over time. This is something else really interesting that I've seen play out, where new construction buildings put in air quality monitors. Maybe this building is pursuing multiple green building certifications. It's going for LEED and it's going for WELL, and there's other stuff happening. So we're focused, we're integrated, the team's thinking about all these things. It's going to be great. We're doing continuous monitoring, we're doing point in time testing, we're doing all the things. And then also we're putting in a whole bunch of new technology, and that's not like fully addressed by some of those conversations in the rating systems yet. So there's off-gassing that has to happen with even some products that we're putting in the building just as a function of where the market is at. So we can test and trend and monitor over time, and then make operational adjustments to those ventilation systems and which systems turn on and off over time during occupancy or unoccupied time, and having that continuous monitoring data plus the point-in-time testing, which then you can come back and do more point-in-time testing later if it's valuable to the project, can all be part of a comprehensive indoor air quality solution. Next slide. What's up with the monitors? What do we have to do? What do they have to meet? The language in the rating system is that kind of second sentence or first sentence of the second paragraph. Monitors must be building grade, meet building grade requirements. And we refer to reset, we refer to UL. We're really trying to create a baseline of like, what do the monitors have to do and be able to measure? This is the actual rating system language, so you can go and read this. They have to have capability of monitoring at different intervals. It's not required to have a digital display or integration with building management system right now, which is great. So there's all kinds of different options on the market to meet this requirement. Next slide. How many monitors? That's the other question that we have all the time. And I will just mention that the air quality point-in-time testing requirements were also updated as part of this rating system to hopefully make that more simple. But this is, again, the kind of rating system language. So 1 monitor per 25,000 square feet of total occupied area. It's usually representative of, you know, a good mix of the air quality. And there's more detail on like, where do these monitors have to go? But this is like, how many monitors do we need? And the best first step here is really looking at programmatic layout of the building, because you can start to say like, well, we think these things are happening here. This is how the occupants are moving around the building. So you can get a pretty solid idea of how many monitors you might need pretty early on in the project. If we go to the next slide, this is where we get a little bit more detailed, but it's really like you want to capture the representative air quality in different areas of the building is probably the most concise way to describe it. There are like many bullet points in the rating system on how do we define that? Like, what is representative air for the project? So we want to think about multiple space types. So if we have an office building as an easy example, we're thinking about like enclosed offices or conference rooms or quiet spaces or other types. Like in a school, you might look at classrooms or auditoriums or admin areas, student assembly areas, or laboratory spaces. And we also have to consider if, you know, we want to capture different ventilation systems, multiple floors, spaces where you're going to have a lot of contaminants. I've also seen instances where we have operable windows in schools, which is great, but then maybe the classroom here is outside the area where the buses are all going to idle and line up here outside. So if we have an outdoor air contaminant issue happening in a specific classroom area, you'd want to monitor those classrooms. And any spaces occupied by like at-risk populations or specifically designed for cleaner air specifically. A lot of specificallys there. Okay, next slide. When we're thinking about implementing IAQ goals in a project, we want to, you know, think again, project specifically. So what's going to bring value to this individual project at this time? Look at a specific monitoring approach and where do we want to put those monitors? How many monitors do we need? How does it integrate with our testing capabilities? Do we have the right professionals on the team to have those conversations? What do our monitor and sensor capabilities have to do to meet those incremental requirements? And then what are we going to do to document these things continuously over time and have responsive protocols? So you can, like I said, you can have limitless conversations on these things. You can streamline it. And really, I think it's relevant to have the right conversations at the right times to add value to the project. So by kind of following this flowchart, these steps, we want to ultimately add value to the project through implementation of IAQ strategies. All right, next slide. I don't know if these QR codes work now that I see the quality of how I got this in here, but maybe just the first step. If you go to usgbc.org, you could try that. Otherwise, it's easy to find from USGBC's website. There are some great education courses now. There are some detailed FAQs available. The resources just like keep rolling out. And I mentioned these Ask the Experts webinars. Those are happening. Those have been really useful and interesting. So lots of stuff, lots of resources, get up to speed. I'm, again, always happy to have additional conversations on this topic. So one more slide here. I like this comprehensive summary that LEED v5 is really the next version of a globally recognized framework for green buildings. So we're looking to embrace market demands and have greater accountability, champion solutions to align the built environment with critical imperatives, which again, as a way of reminder, decarbonization, ecosystem conservation and restoration, equity, health and resilience, and really driving that real world impact from design intent through to operational and influencing positive changes worldwide. That's all I had.
All right. Thank you, Sarah. That was a ton of content in a record amount of time, it feels like. I know that technically we're at time, but I know I booked you for an hour. So if you can spare the time, how does it sound if we just get through a few closing slides and then stick around for some Q&A? Does that sound okay?
Yeah, I was actually planning on that, so that
Okay,
works well for
perfect.
me.
Perfect. Always add buffer time. So there we go. And for anyone else, if you do have to drop, if you have to hop to another meeting, totally understandable. This is being recorded. We will share the recording with you afterwards. And if you're sticking around, drop those Q&A questions. We'll get to those in just a second. But first, before we open it up for Q&A, just wanted to quickly point to this resource here, which we've put together as kind of as promised, and then it'll help you dive deeper into IAQ requirements and certification pathways. It's our LEED, WELL, and Fitwel IAQ requirements cheat sheet, lays out the key parameters along with the requirements across these major building standards all in one easy to reference sheet. So you can scan the QR code here that's up on screen. You get it instantly, or we'll also share the download link in the follow-up email afterwards. So don't worry, you won't miss it if you can't grab it right now. And earlier, so Sarah mentioned some IQ monitors specifications that might help meet LEED's requirements earlier, but just wanted to make quick mention of our most recent IAQ monitor, which might help you meet a lot of those IAQ requirements for LEED and other certifications, including WELL. So if your team's working on LEED v5's IAQ Performance Credit, WELL's air thermal comfort features, or similar standards, choosing the right device, of course, really matters. So Katerra's SenseEdge Go, which you can see up here on screen, was essentially designed with those requirements in mind. So measures key parameters like PM 2.5, CO2, TVOCs, among others, listed on screen. And it's all done through real-time monitoring, data logging, and cloud integration. And this simplifies not only the performance tracking aspect of things, but also documentation come submission time. So SenseEdge Go aligns with all the latest certification thresholds. And this is often without the need for additional testing. So saves you both time and effort as well as money. And it's completely wireless, making it perfect, not just for those new builds, but also retrofit projects. And finally, here, just wanted to highlight one of the easiest ways to streamline your certification work. So Sarah also mentioned some synergies between some of the major building certifications. So if your project is targeting both WELL and LEED, Katerra's monitors are designed to help teams meet both requirements at the same time. So with a single solution, you can track everything required, which counts toward both LEED v5 O&M and WELL v2. And the result, 10 points under LEED and 3 preconditions and 9 optimization points under WELL. So this is all through continuous monitoring, which keeps you compliant, simplifies your documentation process as well. And I will leave you on one final note. If you do need help navigating the IAQ pathway on any current projects that you're working on, whether that's selecting monitors or it's aligning with the certification credits, please reach out to the Katerra team. We're always happy to help. You can just reply to that follow-up email that we'll be sending you after this session. And with that, let's finally jump into Q&A. If you do have any more questions or there's a specific scenario that you'd like to run by Sarah, drop it in the Q&A tab now. I see a few questions that are already lined up here, so we'll try and get to as many as we can. So we've got a question here from Santiago, and that is, does continuous monitoring refer to cloud-based offers, or does it work on on-premise data as well?
Yeah, and this is the part where I will add a disclaimer that I do not have all this rating system language memorized, and I do have to routinely refer back to it myself. So with that said, I don't believe there is any requirement for cloud-based monitoring. So if you have on-premise data, I think we don't differentiate in the rating system where the data has to live. I know there's some nuance with network systems and cellular versus Wi-Fi and operational connectivity to the cloud. But there is not as nuanced of a requirement where the data has to live or can live there. So either or, I think, is fine.
Great. Question here from somebody who says, with the continuous air quality, if you're tracking it and have a spike due to an event, but then make a correction, would you be faulted for that spike, or is it more of an average or staying below the thresholds?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So no, the short answer is no. Like in the O&M rating system, you are not penalized for intermittent spikes in terms of air quality because those happen in existing buildings from time to time, right? They're a function of all kinds of different things that can go on. There in the rating system language, it details out and there's a calculator that goes along with this when you export the data from the monitor, put it in the calculator, upload it to the ARC platform. So no, the short answer is no. There's a calculation that goes into all that data over time, and that you have to meet certain percentiles on, so it's more like an average. Yeah.
Great. Another question here. So, do you anticipate so I know you're not still on the EQ tag, Sarah, but do you anticipate the new ASHRAE 241 standard being incorporated in the future? There's been some discussion around incorporating it into 62.1 as well.
Yeah, we're lucky on the tag to have a lot of folks that have also ASHRAE committee experience or seats on different committees and have a lot of insights into beyond just like what's been publicly released, but like what are we working on next? So yes, that was part of a lot of conversations, and I was just pulling up the rating system language now too, because it did make its way into some prerequisites and credits as a reference, but we definitely had dedicated conversations about like what are we going to require, how much can we require. It's mostly now used as a reference, but that said, I think I wouldn't be surprised if it becomes part of the next version because all this stuff is going to continue to evolve and develop over the next 5 years.
Great. And we have just a few more questions here. So just a reminder to anyone, if you do have any lingering questions, get those in as soon as you can. We're going to answer this one and get to any further questions that you have. So this is a very specific question. I hear from developers that investors have no money for this certification. Is there an ROI with a LEED v5 certification? And this person specifically mentions for a resort or hotel.
Yes, yeah, that's a great question. And we have those conversations all day, every day, I feel like. It's a value-based calculation, and the end of the ROI depends on what the value is going into the input side of that calculation are, I would say. So depending on what are the drivers and what are the levers that we're trying to push and pull, is it to meet investment requirements? Is it to meet some kind of compliance or public reporting, or to draw more people to a property like in a resort, to demonstrate value in an educational space? Like, yes, there is an ROI, or you can calculate an ROI, but it is really project dependent. So I'm not able, unfortunately, to come up with an answer and say like 5 years, right, for this project type. I think that we would all love that. And it's an interesting conversation because I mean, I continue to think about all kinds of project design decisions that we make routinely day to day. I mean, there's thousands of decisions that go into projects that we don't have to have that ROI conversation about. So it's interesting that we've got to this place where we specifically, and I think it's a function of the certification and the credits and the points, because it does appear on the surface like a compliance checklist, that we end up having conversations about like, well, what's the value of the certification? And it's kind of like you have to back it out to say, well, the value of the certification is the third-party verification, and you have to get the third-party verification, just like there's AHJs and code compliance to make sure that everybody's doing the things that they are well intentioned to do, but it's not part of regular design. So then you have to back it into like, well, why is that important? It's important to have good air quality. And why don't we have currently the best possible air quality in buildings? So you could really, go a lot of directions with that, but I think you can calculate it. It's a much bigger conversation.
Right. And it looks like we have one final question here, which is, so you mentioned the monitors standards or building grade monitors. So this person is asking, where is the B105 or UL 2095 sensor requirements referenced in the standard?
let me see if I can search for that right now. I believe in there, it's not in the rating system language that you're able to view just like on the website, because that's not the full reference guide. So there's kind of like the front page rating system language that you're able to view for free on the website. And then there's this detailed reference guide. So like in the BD&C reference guide, I'll tell you specifically here, under that credit requirement for air quality testing and monitoring, EQ Credit 5 starts on page 521 of the BD&C reference guide. And that requirement that lists monitor specifications is on page 528 of the BD&C reference guide.
All right, there you go. Real time, just like I'm
Yeah.
monitoring.
Love it.
All right. I'm a new dad, if you can't tell. Like, I got the corny dad jokes already done. So, cool. That was the last question. So I think we're good to wrap things up. I just wanted to say thank you again to everyone for joining us. If you did stick around, sorry for going slightly over time. Hope you found the session, valuable and informative either way. Also, thank you again to Sarah. I know this has come full circle. We did the draft LEED V5, I think in 2023. And now the finalized LEED V5 webinar. So that's awesome. Always appreciate your collaboration. And yeah, if you'd like to continue any conversation that we had today, or you weren't able to get your question in, just feel free to connect with us on LinkedIn or Sarah on LinkedIn. We'd be happy to continue that conversation. And once again, thank you everyone for joining, and we hope that you have a great rest of your day.